Cool, so we've looked at the basic guards. We're going to move on and look at the basic cuts. And this is going to be the first part of the lesson that gets a bit interactive. I might switch to my single stick just because it's a little bit easier to see on camera. And also, I make reference to these a lot, but I don't think I really show them very often. All right, so coming on guard, preferably not hitting your roof. That will very much upset both your landlord and partner. We're just going to do the basic cut. But to start off with, we're going to start off with an exercise with the knee mat, which is just to loosen the wrist up. So what you do, extend your weapon up and hold out at 45 degrees, pointing away or pointing sword side. So if you think of this side of me as sword side and this side is offside, I'm pointing, my sword is pointing sword side. And what I'm going to do is drop my tip down so that it crosses my body. It's going at 45 degrees. Like that. Turn my hand over, raise my tip up so it's now pointing to the offside. And it's going to drop down at 45 degrees again. That's cut 2. I'm going to turn so my palm is facing up, my tip is sort of pointing to the sword side. I'm going to go straight back up on the same line as I went down to the second cut. This is cut number 3. I'm going to just turn my sword around so it's now pointing offside. Downward, I'm just going to whip it up at 45 degrees. I'm going to turn my hand over, hold that flat. I'm just going to come across at horizontally, that's cut 5. Turn my hand over again, bring it back, that's cut 6. I'm going to bring my sword all the way up vertical, straight down. This is a big cut. We are cutting through, you don't want to just cut. But straight down, that's cut 7. I come back to guard. I might just take this off so you can see my hand. Alright, so from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to guard. Let's practice it a few times. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to guard. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to guard. And one more follow up. And there are a lot of posters online that show a cutting diagram. Just download, follow it. Really cool. I'll try and read the post something. So there we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to guard. Alright. So near as I can tell, you all did that quite well. Oh, we have a chat message which says. So Nat wants to quickly know that how to tell from the camera angle. The intersection points the cut across the face, neck, or chest of the opponent. Short answer to that, this might be easier to show with the cutlass again, sort of switch back. Short answer is it depends. So what you're doing is just getting your wrist to be able to move at these angles, and then you're adjusting based on height. So if I'm fencing, I might throw a cut 1 at my sword arm, especially if they've exposed it. I might throw a cut 4 at their face. And all I'm doing is adjusting the height of my hand depending on where I throw. So you see sort of talk about this. We'll have things like a cut 2 thrown at the leg, or a cut 3 thrown at the belly. But the idea is more, these are angles of attack. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then where you direct those attacks, you do by adjusting the height. If that makes sense. Yeah, level with the wrist. That's probably a better way of explaining it than I did. So thank you for that. I'm still late. All right. So speaking of doing that, I'm going to make the next bit of this a little bit more complicated for you. So instead of just going through them all continuously, we're going to go back and forth, or we're going to go back to guard between each cup. What we're going to do is extend cup 1, back to guard, then cup 2, back to guard. Then instead with cup 3, if you find the angle a bit hard, one thing you can do is loosen your grip, the other thing you can do is pop your shoulder up, bend your elbow a little bit to get a bit of slack in the structure. If I'm having an angle otherwise. Cup 3 up, back to guard. Then cup 4, come back to guard. Then cup 5, sweep across, come back to guard. Then cup 6, sweep across, come back to guard. Punch out cup 7, drop the tip down, come back to guard. So let's do it again. This time, instead of me just demonstrating, I'll get you to follow along. So let's just go through those by numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As a tip, with any cut that is diagonal or horizontal, so actually anything except the vertical cut, you want to make sure that you've got when you're extending, that your hand is on one side of your body and your tip is on the front. So you've always got the sword out in front of you, covering your bend. So when we go through and count again, I want you to focus on making sure that you're covering yourself by having your sword, your hand on one side of your body, and your tip on the other as you extend. So let's practice that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. So the next thing I want you to think about as we're doing next round of cuts is I want you to think of punching and whipping. So when you're cutting, the motion is not arcing your hand like this. You're punching. You're punching, you just extend your hand out and then whipping your sword around. This is what I talk about, like punching and whipping. And the idea is you're punching the hilt of your sword into your opponent's weapon and then whipping your tip around to cut them. I want you to focus on that as we go through the next lot of So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. Cool. And so last thing that you need to focus on, we go through this one more time, is focus on being smooth. I'll actually count a little bit slower this time so you can focus on being kind of smooth and relaxed. As much as there's a tendency to try and tense all your muscles to get as much force into the blow as possible, tense muscles are slow muscles, and slow muscles are weak muscles. So what you want is to be relaxed, because if you're relaxed, you're smooth. If you're smooth, you're fast. If you're fast, you'll hit hard. Which is a more complicated way of saying you like water, which is what Bruce Lee was talking about. Flow like water. Right. So being relaxed and being smooth. Let's go through again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. So now I'm going to make that a little bit more complicated for you. And we're going to add in some footwork. So the most basic footwork, or the most common type of footwork, I guess, you have in the system is the lunge. So I'll just do it with cuts 1 and 2, just to make it a little bit easier. But when you lunge, you extend your sword out first. So this is the bit where you punch your sword out to get control of your opponent's sword so you can come safely. Kick your foot out to start the lunge movement. Notice I'm sitting up on the heel of my foot. And I can sit here for quite a while. It's quite comfortable. And I've got quite a good, secure platform to basically move back and forth. Also, I'm keeping my tip high. Then what I do is I roll onto my front foot. I extend my back foot. I extend my back leg. My back leg is basically springing me forward. And then as the toes of my front foot hit the ground, I want to get my sword to full extension, which is when it would be hitting my opponent. And now I'm at full extension. The lunge hasn't finished yet. I need to come back. So what I'm going to do is bend the back knee, use my back knee to basically pull myself back, lift my toes and my front foot up, just give me some extra oomph, coming back as well. I come back, And I leave my sword extended right up until I'm back in my stance, because I want to get my sword out to deter my opponent from running in. So let's go through, and I'm just going to count that through, firstly bit by bit, and then we'll do them as single lines after we've done a few practices bit by bit. So extend, kick, lunge, retract. Extend, kick, lunge, retract. I'm just going to do cuts 1 and 2 because they're fairly easy. But if you've done lessons before, or you've done a lot of saving, you want to play with things, try using some of the other cuts as well. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and possibly even 8 with the hidden cut. All right. So go through again. Extend, kick, lunge, retract. 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 All right, so we've done that bit by bit, or like in sequence but broken up. So now we're going to do it as one movement, but I want you to remember this is a sequence. I don't want to try and do everything at once, because what that will mean is that I'm attacking uncovered. I extend to cover myself. If my opponent does something weird or funky, I just retract, or actually what I tend to do, if I extend and my opponent does something weird, I usually have a crack at their sword arm just to keep them in check. Because I find that usually anything, if people try and resist me extending, getting control of their sword to come in, there's very few ways that they can move their sword to a position where they can then attack me without exposing their sword arm to attack. So let's just try this out. I'm just going to call lunge. I want you to do the whole movement, but I'm going to try and keep it slow so we can do it as smoothly as possible. So lunge, 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 and lunge, and back you go. All right, so before I check if there's any questions, I'm going to preemptively answer one I always get asked, which is, what is the 8th forbidden cut? And the 8th cut and saber, it appears in technically two British manuals, but it's only advocated in one, which is Alfred Hutton's Cold Steel, where he says there is an 8th cut. It's from Italian fencing, Italian saber, but it's not a very polite cut, because the primary target, being a rising cut, is the fork of the legs, and therefore it's not really appropriate for school play. But all you do for cut number 8 is I turn my sword so it's vertically facing downwards, and then whip it up. And you can use this as an attack on a horizontal target like the sword arm, but the primary target again is the groin, which is forbidden in both period and modern establishments. The other place it appears is in Richard Burton's saber, where he talks about a German system, or references a German system that has all 8 cuts, because he says, hey, this is what the Germans do. It's good, but it's not as good as what he suggests, which is, and what Burton suggests is a lot more cumbersome. All right, so let's see. The chat. Yes, the unkindness of it all. The unkindest cut of all. Yes, definitely is. All right. So does anyone have any questions about the cuts or about lunging before we move on? I'll take those in. So I'm just going to stop recording.